Hi, my name is Ashley Campbell with Sublime Review. Thank you so much for checking out today's video and my Candyman review. If you are listening to the audio-only version of this, I appreciate you coming in to listen to it. It's been quite a while since I've released a podcast, so thank you again for coming in to check it out. Without further ado, let's get into the Candyman review. So we are back in Cabrini, which has now been gentrified. Cabrini is the neighborhood we explored in the first movie, that Candyman was in, where he was torturing and terrorizing people. And, in today's time, it has now been gentrified. Most people have moved out, and the only people who know about the Candyman legends are the old hats, like all the old people. At least until our protagonist, Anthony, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, learns about the legends. He incorporates it into his art, and through his artwork, people find out about Candyman, and they start summoning him, and people start dying. So in this review, I'm going to give you the good, the not so good, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on whether or not you should see this in theaters or in streaming. So let's get into it. First, with the good, I have to say one of the things I did not like about the original movie was who Candyman decided to be his victims. I didn't like the fact that he was terrorizing a black neighborhood. I know he was meant to be like their boogeyman, but it didn't make sense to me when you consider his backstory in the first movie, where he fell in love with a white woman, he got her pregnant, and obviously that was a no-no. So he was tortured and killed by a mob of white people, and yet he goes on to terrorize this black neighborhood. That never made any sense to me. So I think in this movie they kind of tried to correct that a bit by having him go after white people. They changed up his backstory in this one, where instead of falling in love with the woman, he passes out candy to kids, and one day a little white girl gets a razor blade in her candy, and so the police are in search of him, and they find him, they kill him. Turns out he was actually innocent, and I think they end up covering up his murder. So you combine that with the neighborhood now being gentrified and all the black people moving out and the white people moving in, and you have his motive for targeting white people. Now, whether or not you think that's right or wrong, I like the fact that his backstory now matches his motivations on who he's killing. So there's that. Another thing I found interesting were the deaths. Not necessarily the deaths themselves, although I think that the deaths were kind of your typical slasher kills, but I like how they were shot or portrayed. There was a lot of use of mirrors. So, for example, there's this one scene, not going to get into it or anything, but in the bathroom where the people who are getting killed in the bathroom, we mostly see it through like this little handheld mirror, and I thought that was pretty cool how that was shot. So the director really plays around with mirrors in this movie, and I liked how she did that. Another thing I liked was the actors. Some actors stood out the most to me, those being Teyonah Parris and Yahya Abdul-Mateen. I thought that they were great. They're such great protagonists. Yahya Abdul-Mateen but he's also just a really compelling leading figure. His character is very tortured in this movie, and he does a good job portraying that. Teyonah Parris, she actually surprised me, her character, because I was not expecting her character to be so involved in the story, and I like that she was. She makes a great lead in this, or a co-lead in this, and when she is on screen, she does the job. She understands the assignment, and she keeps you interested up until a certain point, but that's not her fault, and we'll get into that. Another actor I liked was Nathan Stewart Jarrett. Yeah, he was funny. I liked his chemistry with Teyonah Parris. I wouldn't mind him actually being in another horror movie that I can watch him in. And yeah, I really like the actor. Another thing, the puppetry. If you've seen the trailers, then you've seen like how they utilize puppetry to tell the stories, and they do that a few times in this movie. And I like the way they do that. Instead of just giving us countless flashbacks to tell us a story, they use puppetry, and that's pretty cool. And the last thing, the last thing that I really enjoyed was the way the movie was shot in itself. It's a gorgeous movie. I like the use of the lighting, the color schemes, the actors. You know, we primarily have dark skinned actors in here. Yeah, dark skinned actors in here, and their skin pops. Like it's a really lovely movie to look at. So let's get into the not so good aspects of this movie. Um, Primary thing, the story and the script were really weak. Now, when I first came into it, I was obviously invested because I waited a year for this movie. I was really interested in another Jordan Peele movie, even though he's not directing, he's co-writing it and producing it. I like Candyman, so I wanted to see what they were doing with it. And I just want to see more horror movie with black people. So I was like, okay, cool. And so, again, when I was talking about how the movie is gorgeously shot, when I came in, I was very impressed with how pretty the movie looked. But as I slowly started to watch it more and more, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really having any fun with this. I think the first grievance that this movie has is that it's not a scary movie. And you might say, like, well, Ashley, Jordan Peele movies aren't necessarily scary movies because they're supposed to be about social commentary. And this movie does try to give us a social commentary about gentrification. But how do I say this? Like, the social commentary is there, but the way they utilize the Candyman character, they basically turn him into a slasher character. And I'm going to get into Candyman in a minute. But the way they used him, I don't think they really used him all that well in here to really sell the social aspect of it. And so it at times just felt like your regular slasher movie. And I'm like, okay, if you're just going to give me people just getting killed and stuff, then at least make it scary, which it was not. Because I can take a movie that's not scary if I feel like the conversation that's happening within the movie is actually compelling and interesting. Like with Get Out, I liked that Get Out wasn't a scary movie at all, but I liked that the conversation behind the movie, you know, the discussion that you can have about the movie itself was what compelled me the most and what makes it one of my favorite horror movies, right? But Candyman does not do that. Instead, it becomes a slasher movie. I'm like, if you're just going to give me kills, then at least make me scared. And it doesn't even attempt to do that. So that was like the one big grievance. The other thing is that I kind of already knew what was going to happen. With the trailers, I was, you know, when the trailers came out, I was thinking like, how is Yahya Abdul, you know, the main character, how is his character related to Candyman? Why is Candyman focused on this guy? And I figured it out before I even watched the movie. And so when they did like a reveal, it was supposed to like this big lead up to this little reveal, to this big reveal. I was like, I already knew this. And so that part was disappointing as well. I didn't like how they changed the character's backstory. Now, to their credit, they do try to maintain the backstory from the first movie and combine it with the second one. But I think in doing that, by giving him a new backstory, we lost a certain aspect of Candyman. And I'm going to talk about that again once I get into the Candyman section where I talk about him. But by giving him a new backstory, even with them trying to connect it to the first, it made me wonder, like, why did you do a Candyman remake? Why didn't you, or a sequel? Why didn't you just make another movie if you were just going to use a brand new backstory? So there's that issue. I also had a problem with the third act. I'm going to get into the third act, but first, let me talk about Candyman, another character that I have a problem with. Again, this is in line with the script and the storytelling. Yeah, I think they did Candyman I think they did Candyman dirty in this movie. Um, First, again, with the backstory, I think that by trying to change his history and his backstory, we lost a little aspect of him. But they also didn't bring the characters, how do I say this, like personality to this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, Candyman in the first movie, he's a murderer, he's a killer, he's the spirit entity. Like, what is Candyman? Like, an entity that kills, right? But he had motive. He was a motive driven entity. Kind of like Mike Myers. Uh, it's like if you took away the Laurie Strode story from Mike Myers and then tried to tell me like, oh, this character is Mike Myers. I'm like, no, it's not, because you just took away his story, his primary motive. So what are you talking about? And that's kind of how I felt the same with Candyman. Um, Another thing I liked about Candyman, kind of going back to his personality again, is that he did have personality as a character. Yes, he was a murderer, but he had a personality. And they did not bring that aspect to him at all in this movie, not until the very end. And I'm like, okay, so now he's speaking. But this whole time he's like this silent figure who's just killing people. And by doing that, by making that decision, it just felt like a regular, again, slasher film. Um, it didn't feel like a Candyman movie. Like they were bringing back this kind of iconic character and bring him back in a new way. Yeah, it's unfortunate though. So that was my problem with Candyman. The third thing, again, sticking in line with the script, the storytelling, all of that, is that third act was so bad. It was That third act lasted 5 minutes. I swear to you. It came and went. Everybody got together. They had another reveal, and I didn't expect the reveal, but I wasn't shocked or surprised. I didn't even care at that point because I feel like the movie wasn't really retaining my attention throughout. I was kind of just watching it just to watch it by the time we got to the third act. And when the third act came about, it just ended so quickly. And there was a part like at the very end where it didn't even make sense to me why it ended the way it did. Um, yeah, so that was probably with Candyman, and then with the third act. Like those are additional things against the movie that I just didn't really care for. Coleman Domingo, one last thing with him. I liked his performance during the first and second act, but by the time we got to him in the third act, I felt like he was a little over the top. And this is actually a thing with the directing and with the acting in the third act. Like it all felt very rushed and messy, that final act. And so I think the directing and acting also suffered at the end as well. So my overall thoughts about Candyman is it's a low, medium movie. I don't think that there was anything special about it. And I think that what was special about Candyman was taken out of it, specifically with the character, Candyman. By stripping away some aspects of him or, trying to save it until the very end, they basically took away what was most compelling about this story, in my opinion. I think part of that issue was trying to turn it into something like update it into this, modern social commentary film. We could just took what was already there and then just add more to it. I think that the writing could have been a little bit more creative in order to keep me really invested. The ending, to go from the beginning and then try to get to that ending was not worth it at all to me. So when it comes to seeing this movie in theaters or watching on streaming, I personally would recommend watching it on streaming. If I had to give it like a rating, I would probably give it like maybe like a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10. Yeah, it was a no for me. And a part of that is because I do think it was hyped up. There was a lot of anticipation with this film. And so it's unfortunate that it couldn't meet those standards. So that is it with my Candyman review. Sorry about that little tangent at the end. I just had to talk about the writers and the directors for a minute there. Let me know what you guys think. If you have checked out the movie, did you enjoy it? What are the things that you enjoyed about it? Maybe the stuff that I didn't like, maybe you did like. You can comment below. Be sure to comment below, like, subscribe. You can check me out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm primarily now on Instagram. I do update my Facebook regularly. So I look forward to seeing you guys. Hope you have a great week. Bye.